Welcome. Today we're diving straight into a truly captivating piece of cultural history from a place called Luwur. We're going to unpack this fascinating story about survival, hidden messages, and a centuries-old tradition that, believe it or not, was born out of a single, highly unusual hunting trip. If you've ever wondered how these strict, multi-generational rules actually come into existence and end up shaping an entire community's way of life, well, you're absolutely in the right place. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. At the very center of what we're looking at today is a highly specific, totally unbreakable rule in Luwur. Eating porcupine is strictly forbidden. It's a taboo that's been passed down from generation to generation, and honestly, it is still deeply respected today. But why? I mean, how does a specific animal go from being a great potential source of food to being completely, permanently banned from the dinner table? Well, to really understand this, we have to trace the origins all the way back to the ancestors of this region.
Section 1. The Elders of Luwur, Keepers of Tradition. Long ago, you see, this community was guided by elders who fiercely, and I mean fiercely, held on to the beliefs of their ancestors, making sure that past customs dictated their present.
Now, to really grasp their mindset, we have to look at how they actually viewed their environment. For the elders of Luwur, nature wasn't just some pretty backdrop. It wasn't just a place where they built their homes or found their food. It was a primary source of meaning, messages, and guidance. Their unique worldview framed absolutely everything around them as intentional. The forest, the animals, the weather. To them, the natural world was constantly communicating.
And because of that deep connection to nature, they lived by one very specific philosophy. Nothing happens by chance. Literally nothing. They believed every single event, no matter how tiny, carried a hidden message. And because they believed this so strongly, they were incredibly meticulous in their daily actions. They were constantly checking in with one another, reminding each other to follow their customs perfectly, honestly terrified of missing a sign or somehow disrespecting the natural order.
Moving on to Section 2, a successful hunt into the forest. The specific event that changed their culture forever started on a crisp, cool morning. The elders gathered up their tools and headed deep into the wet woods to find food.
Even as they were walking, the heavy weight of their traditions was resting right on their shoulders. One of the elders turned to the group and said, "Don't forget, we must not break our customs while hunting." And another immediately replied, confirming they always had to remember the words of their ancestors. So you can see tradition was at the absolute forefront of their minds before the hunt even truly began.
And their strict adherence to tradition seemed to really pay off. Deep in the forest, they made a fantastic catch, a porcupine. And we're not just talking about any porcupine, but a really big one large enough to comfortably feed the entire hunting party. Naturally, the elders were absolutely thrilled. They were smiling, congratulating each other on their luck, and just feeling this immense sense of joy and relief that they were going to eat well that day.
But then we get to Section 3, the search for fire. A sudden problem. Right as their spirits soared, a critical, seemingly impossible issue came out of literally nowhere, stopping their celebration dead in its tracks.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the incredible irony of their situation. The problem? They had this massive catch, right? But nobody had brought fire to cook the meat. And, as they quickly pointed out to each other, you definitely can't eat it raw. So the only solution they could possibly think of was to travel all the way to a distant place called Tatang just to fetch fire. Imagine that. They had the food, but absolutely zero way to prepare it right there in the forest.
Let's look at how this day actually unfolded, because it's quite a journey. They entered the forest in the cool morning. By midday, awesome, they had caught the big porcupine. But by the afternoon, the harsh realization hits that they have no fire. This forced them into a grueling, exhausting late-afternoon trek. The path to Tang Tang was incredibly difficult, navigating through thick forest, tripping over roots, climbing over jagged rocks. It took a massive physical toll, but they just kept encouraging each other, totally determined to get back and cook that meal.
Finally, after that absolutely exhausting trek, they reached Tintong, secured the fire, and made the arduous journey all the way back. When they finally returned to where they had left the porcupine, a huge wave of relief washed over them. "Finally, we got it," one said. They started setting up, mouths probably watering at this point, completely ready to finally cook their prize.
Which brings us to the climax and Section 4, the hidden firestone, a strange discovery. Just as they were preparing the fire, the most mundane moments suddenly shifted into something supernatural. As they were working, this strange, completely unexpected sound echoed from one of the elders' tools. One of the men stopped dead in his tracks and said, "Wait, do you hear that?" Everything just halted. The sound was coming directly from inside one of their machetes.
They gathered around, inspecting the tools super carefully, just wondering what on earth could possibly be making a noise inside a solid object.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer shock of what they found. They opened up the machete handle and discovered a firestone hidden right inside. I mean, it's basically the ancient equivalent of tearing your entire house apart, looking for your sunglasses, only to realize they're sitting right on top of your head. The exact means to make fire was resting at their hips the entire time they were out there exhausting themselves.
The elders stared at the stone in absolute shock. "How did we not notice this before?" one asked. Then another elder spoke up, his voice heavy with this sudden realization. This is not just a coincidence. Remember their core belief? Nothing happens by chance. Deep in their hearts, as they stood there in the quiet forest, they realized this hidden firestone wasn't a mistake. It was a profound, undeniable sign.
And that leads to Section 5, the Rule of Seki, honoring the sign. This single, strange event simply could not be ignored, and it ultimately became a permanent cultural law.
So the crucial point here is how they reacted. They didn't just laugh off the mistake, shrug, and eat the food anyway. No way. They determined that the hidden stone was a direct warning from their ancestors. They agreed instantly that this sign had to be honored. Even though they had worked all day, even though they had traveled miles to Tentingan and back, they made the incredibly difficult decision right then and there to sacrifice their meal. They would not eat the porcupine. And that exact moment birthed a brand new law, Seki. From that day forward, the elders firmly declared that porcupine was forbidden to eat. This wasn't just some temporary dietary restriction either. It became a deeply respected taboo, directly linked back to that ancestral warning in the forest. The rule of Seki was born, and it was to be strictly passed down through every single generation that followed.
And you know, the legacy of those elders lives on today. To this very day, the people of Lur still strictly follow the rule of Seki. For them, it's about so much more than just avoiding a specific type of meat. It's about honoring their ancestors' message. It's about keeping the balance in life. It serves as a daily reminder to always respect the signs given by nature and to honor the people who walked the forest long before them.
The story of Lur really shows us how a single fleeting moment in nature can define a culture's entire belief system. And it kind of leaves us to wonder about our own lives, doesn't it? We might not find firestones hidden in our tools, but we are all surrounded by history and context. So how do you interpret the signs, the traditions, and the history left by those who came before you? It's definitely something fascinating to chew on. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, keep asking questions.